Greetings and welcome to the 2020 Reform Party National Convention. This is our public forum, a Q&A with our presidential candidates. Each day over the course of this week, we're having a chance to interview each of the candidates. Our candidates for the presidential nomination are Max Abramson, Soraya Fass, Roque de la Fuente, and Ben Zion. Tonight, I have the very distinct honor of speaking with Roque de la Fuente. Before we begin, I want you to know that we are streaming this live as well as onto Facebook Live. And we're also recording this event. So we're going to make this available not just on Facebook, but also our YouTube channel as well as our website. So we'll certainly send out an email if you, for whatever reason, don't get a chance to stay for the whole thing so that you get a chance to watch. Please ask your questions using the chat. And if you don't get your question answered, we'll try to follow up and get the question answered at a later date. Now, I'd like to take a moment just to briefly introduce Roque de la Fuente. Roque is an amazing story. He's basically a man who's made a great success in business, but he's also someone who's lived an incredible life of diversity, inclusion, and family. He was born in California, spent most of his life living between California and Mexico, got into business, and has been very successful working all across the country in many different industries. And as you'll get a chance to hear tonight, Roque is a man who's very passionate about this country and wants to take this country in a different direction. So I'd like to welcome you, Mr. de la Fuente. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much, Michael.
So before we get into some of the topics and the questions coming in from a lot of our delegates as well as from the general public, if you don't mind, just a very brief introduction, a minute and a half to 2 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable with, just so people get an idea of who you are and why you want to be president of the United States.
Well, the question is this: if we had a better candidate besides Hillary and Trump, or between Biden and Trump, and if we had a Ronald Reagan or Martin Luther King or somebody to that stature, I would have stayed home. Unfortunately, the two-party systems are giving us very bad options. But more importantly, let's talk about what I have accomplished. I've been making payroll for 45 years, week in, week out, every 2 weeks, every month. I have created thousands and thousands of jobs. I still create thousands and thousands of jobs. I currently do business in 5 countries. In the United States, I do business in 10 states. And in California, I manage basically over 100 different properties in over 30 different cities or jurisdictions. And I have a lot of experience in fields that most people do not have. For example, one of the things I'm very proud is we got a power plant approved, up and running in our property, which is 660 megawatts. That plant by itself gives electricity to over 500,000 people in San Diego County. In addition to that, for those people who do not know, we created 3 peaker plants, 330 megawatts. They're just there so your refrigerator will work in those peak times in the summer. Right now, we're building the biggest plant for batteries, 250 megawatts. So that's an interesting field all by itself, which is the future, because it's a way to be able to bring in, store energy at night and give it during the day. But I'm in everything. I have De La Fuente Business Park, which is a 320-acre business park, 1 mile by half a mile. A lot of businesses in it. I build everything from the streets, the sewer, the water pipes, everything, all the infrastructure. I have International Industrial Park. I have Rancho Vista Del Mar. So we have created, we have a lot of interesting companies that will come to our parks, and we're able to create additional jobs within those parks. I've been in the money exchange business. I solved the Mexico-United States crisis in 1982 by creating 11 money exchanges, 7 in California and 4 in Texas. I've been in the banking industry. I created a national bank and 2 states banks. So I know what it is to deal with the regulators firsthand. Nobody can tell me how good they are, how bad they are. It's what's interesting is every organization happens to have a couple of bad apples. I don't know if it's the police or if it's in politics or if it's in industry. And you cannot just change all the rules because there's a couple of bad apples in the system. But anyway, my recommendation to all of those who are hearing me is you can go to Roque101.com, and I have a beautiful page set up that basically tells my whole history, so you don't have to hear it from me. At the same token, it's if you go to Google or to Bing, any of the search engines, and put my name, you have interviews, over 100 different interviews in Spanish and English. Puedo hablar español también como puedo hablar inglés. I can change from Spanish to English in the middle of a sentence. I was raised in Mexico City, and that's why my Spanish is flawless. And I was also raised in California. So judge my English by what it is, but I can guarantee you that my Spanish is a little bit better. In today's time, when we're dealing with Latin America, with all the problems in Latin America, imagine if you can have a commander-in-chief that's able to talk to those presidents in their own native language, and he can understand the slang or everything else that goes into it. But anyway, it's you have here another opportunity besides all the videos that are there that you can see, where you can ask me some specific questions based on June of 2020 versus all the other ones that you can actually see by going into any other search engines. Go ahead, Michael.
Great. No, thank you so much, and we will make sure that on our website and other channels that your video does get circulated as well, because it's a great video, and we appreciate you sharing that with us. As you know, we'll talk first about current events. I do want to talk about immigration and foreign policy issues, and particularly Latin America as well. But before we get into that, current events, certainly things that are on people's minds. A lot of the violence against Black Americans we've seen from.
Let me ask you a question, Michael. In my screen, you look like you froze. Did I do that to you?
No, you're fine.
No, but you're frozen.
No, we're okay.
On my green, you look at me like you're how do you call it? Like Frankenstein.
Uh-oh. Well, we're okay. But so really quickly, the issue with violence against Black Americans from the police and a lot of the uprisings and riots, as well as the protests. We've seen the reaction from President Trump. We've seen the reaction from the Democratic Party. And I think most people don't feel very satisfied with how our politicians are responding to the current situation. As someone who's an independent, someone who is also an ethnic minority, who's had a lot of experience in inclusion, what would you do differently to approach the problem that we see today?
Well, it all starts from the top. My position is quite simple. Our commander-in-chief likes to divide and conquer. That's his favorite game he likes to play. My game is you need to unite, not divide. So if you're all the way from the top in your administration, in the people you hire, you make sure that you have the right representations of African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, etc. Automatically, and you basically tell them, everybody, that our purpose in life is to make sure that we represent the American people and we unite and not divide. When you start basically dividing, you create basically the people that are not able to, they're not able to get their voice heard. So when you see people protesting, it's because they hear every day how they want to divide them. My policy is very simple. I'm here to unite, not to divide.
Very well said. Thank you. The other major concern that is going on in the country today is that we have over 40 million people who are currently unemployed due to the COVID pandemic. We have a president that's trying to rush businesses back, and the other party that seems to be trying to restrict openings as much as possible. A lot of the work that was done between the two parties to prevent the virus, to get testing, was very lacking. We've had millions of people unable to file for uninsurance claims and lots of problems. What would you do differently to address the current pandemic, as well as the potential for that pandemic to increase in the months ahead?
Well, first of all, if you take a look at some of the videos that I have watched, I saw the owner, Bill Gates, Microsoft, 5 years ago, telling us that we could be facing this pandemic, this COVID. I saw Obama telling them that they were trying to prepare because this could actually be happening. They were movies that were done Contagion in about 10 years ago. It's almost identical to what's happening today. So we basically, and more importantly, history has taught us that in 1919, 100 years ago, we basically faced something similar. So we should have been prepared and not basically wing it as the minute this thing arrives. But forget about what has happened. What are we going to do about it? Right. The first thing we need to do is create jobs. For example, the border between Mexico and the United States is 1,954 miles, 3,133 kilometers. Now, spending the type of money to create a fence is completely, we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. Imagine a Fortune 500 company is only $6 billion. So what we should create a foreign trade zone where we can, in Mexico, in Chihuahua, or in Texas, or a combination of both of those two states, and then all the people that need work come in and try to create work there, and have it closer to home than bring all that product from China. In other words, right now, a lot of products are being manufactured in China. We need to bring those closer to homes. Depending on the type of industry, we want it in the United States territory, but if they happen to be labor intensive, and we need to have a lower wage, maybe we create a special opportunity zone that is for the purpose of bringing all the people from South America, from Central America, or from Mexico to work in that special zone to be able to be part of the supply chain for all the industries. Now, my specialty is infrastructure. The first thing I would have done when I was elected in 2016, i.e. Trump, I would have created an infrastructure bill for $1 trillion or $2 trillion and not do what now they're thinking of doing it maybe this time because of COVID. Well, guess what? We need infrastructure. We need projects like the Golden Gate Bridge, like the Hoover Dam. We have a huge problem in the future because we do not have enough water. We need to create dams. We need to create storage facilities for water. We need to create pipes to bring water from the Rockies to the 30 states that have agriculture. We need to create water coming from Alaska or from Canada or from the Arctic, pipes. And with that water, we create prosperity. We need to create jobs and lead the world in trillions and trillions of trees. We need to plant trees all over the place. To make sure that we replace the ones that are being burned in the Amazon, to create trees all over the world, to have trees in India. We need to plant trees so what we're breathing is better and we can have a better, greener world. But more importantly, we need water. With water, we have farms. With farms, we have food. With food, we have supply. We need to, because of COVID, rethink how we're going to do our meat industry, our pork industry, our chicken industry, and create maybe brand new factories and rethink the way those factories have to look today to make sure that we will have that meat supply, chicken supply, pork supply in the future. And basically, there's the opportunities there. And I believe the biggest shortage we have in today's United States is water.
You spoke about the economic zone between the United States and Mexico that you'd like to see built. Immigration is certainly one of the major issues that is impacting this country. We have millions of people who came to this country looking for work, who now do not have a legal status. What would be your position as far as handling people, particularly young people who came here with their parents and don't have a legal status currently in this country?
Well, I did not create the mess, but we have over 12 million people that currently do not have papers. 12 million people. If you basically follow Trump's position that he would like to deport them, an average bus has 54 seats. How many buses do we need to deport 12 million people? Those 12 million people, some of them are married. Some of them have American children. So it isn't as easy, as simple as saying, okay, you 12 million people, then you managed to be here for 20 years or plus, you now need to go home. Now, you can create an opportunity, like a special area between Texas and Chihuahua, and whereby you create all this work and allow all these people to move there legally. You can create this area where people can come from San Salvador, or they can come from Honduras, or they can come from Central America, and they come to this working zone. And if we want them in the U.S. territory, well, we create basically a special, similar to what they did in China with Hong Kong. You create a unique enterprise zone whereby it can be half in the United States, half in Mexico, all in the United States, all in Mexico, whatever the experts tell us that can be accomplished, and try to generate millions of jobs, which is what we need now.
Excellent. We've had a couple of questions come in from people who are watching online. One of the questions is, you ran before in 2016. What makes 2020 different?
Well, a lot of experience. In 2016, I learned that the Democrats and the Republicans do not allow you ballot access. They do not allow you to participate in debates. There was a big case just got decided last week whereby if you do not have 15% support, you will not be allowed to participate in the debates. But more importantly, it starts with ballot access. The Reform Party today only has access in one state, and that is Florida. They tried to qualify in Louisiana in 2016. They were not able to get the electors, and they had a fight with the state of Mississippi. So today, the Reform Party is one of six parties that are allowed to participate in Florida. Now, when we talk to Florida, in 2016, I was able to change the curve. The curve, whatever happened in 2012, 2008, I managed to get more votes than the presidential candidate in 2008 or in 2012. I got 9,108 votes. But more importantly, the same year, I got 60,810 in Florida. And in 2018, I got 186,636 votes in Florida. So today, Florida, which is what the Reform Party is today, I got 256,550 people that physically voted for me. And I hope that these people will vote for me again. In California, the numbers are very interesting. I got 143,662 votes, 139. By the way, on the 186,000 that I got in Florida, some counties I was able to get in excess of 20%, which I was very, very proud. Total votes, since I decided to run for politics, is over $500,000. It's very easy said, it's not easy to obtain. But more importantly, you need to get ballot access. To be able to win, it takes a strategy. And I'm going to show you a map that shows you basically the United States. I recommend everybody to go to 270 to win. It's interactive and you're able to play with it. But this basically tells you where the battleground states are, which states are already been decided, and which states are yet to be decided. If you take a look at this chart, you see that, for example, the Democrats have 193 electoral votes. The Republicans have 83. And there's nothing you can do to change that. There's no question that the Democrats will get the 55 electors from California and the 29 from New York. By the same token, the Republicans will get the biggest prize for the Republicans, technically is Texas, but it's now iffy. So the Republicans basically only have 83 elector votes. As you're aware, we need 270 to win. So if you take a look at Florida, and you take a look at Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, those are the battleground states. Whoever wins those is going to be the next president of the United States. Now, 3 states that I'm putting my focus on is Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I plan to be on the ballot in those 3 states. Maine, I believe we can win 1 or 2 electors in Maine. And if we are able, if this thing becomes as close as I predicted it's going to be, then if nobody gets 270, it gets to be decided by Congress. And there, it might be an opportunity as the Republicans fight the Republicans, and the Democrats fight the Democrats, vice versa. As the Democrats fight the Republicans and the Republicans fight the Democrats, maybe I might become the person that breaks the logjam, and maybe we will make a difference. But no question about it, that the third party will make history in 2024 or 2028. And I'm basically showing people the way. How do you qualify in different states? For example, if you want to be in the ballot in Delaware, you have to have started over a year ago. You have to be a party registered in Delaware. Right now, I got the Alliance Party of South Carolina, the Alliance Party with their people that are supporting them in Connecticut, in Minnesota, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. I already have ballot access in Arkansas. I'm working my way to make sure that I qualify in other states. I will be in the ballot in Idaho. I will be in the ballot in Nevada, in Utah, in Colorado, in a few other states. It is very, very difficult. People don't understand what it takes to be able on the ballot in California. In California, as an independent, you need 194,000 petitions. And you have to do it in 105 days.
Right.
It requires, just to be in California alone, an expenditure in excess of $4 million. The same thing is true for Texas and for Florida. Those are the toughest states to be in the ballot. So my fellow presidential candidates for the Reform Party, if you have not started ballot access now, you ain't going to get anything. Even if you're lucky to be selected by the Reform Party, then you're only going to have ballot access in Florida. But to be able to be a party of choice, today you need to have consensus with other parties. I like Jim Rex out of the Alliance Party because he came up with the beautiful name Alliance. He's saying, look, there's a party in Oregon. Why don't we unite for the common good? There's a party in Washington State. Why don't we unite? There's a party already in Delaware, the American Delta. Why don't we unite? And the same thing applies. There's a new party, the Sam Party in New York. So the question, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy to be able just to qualify in the ballot. Now, I said before, mi español es casi perfecto. I get a lot of attention by the Mexican press. I get a lot of attention by all the Latin press. And therefore, I can bring in and unite all those minorities they've been disfranchised. We need to accomplish that. And we need to basically make sure that the Asians know where to come, that the Latins know where to come. And we need to make sure that the Filipino, and for that matter, all the other nationalities. Of course, don't forget the African American and don't forget the American people. But Florida is a mismatch. There's everybody's in Florida from almost every nation in the world. So more importantly is, first of all, we need to have ballot access. Then we need to make sure that between media, we'll get 15% of the people to say that they like us as a potential candidate and then qualified for the debates. My estimation is, unless we coordinate this between all the parties, the small ones, the middle ones, and the big ones, there's not going to be, nobody's going to qualify for the debates. I believe that the Libertarians and the Green parties will not get the same type of numbers they got 4 years ago. My hope and my mathematical formula says that if I'm able to beat the Green Party and the Libertarian Party and have the Alliance and the Reform Party as part of the group, that we're able to basically come in third. If we come third, we will make history. And we will basically set the way for future candidates to seek the same nomination 4 and 8 years from now.
Excellent. One of the questions that came in along the lines of what you were just talking about as far as ballot access is a concern that people in a very hotly contested election will have, and that's the wasted vote syndrome concern that people will say, well, don't vote for an alternative party, don't vote for an alternative candidate because you'll just re-elect Donald Trump or you'll just elect Vice President Biden. How would you approach that? You touched on it a little bit, but if you could expand a little bit upon how you would convince people that their vote won't be wasted, that it will be impactful and make a difference.
Well, first and foremost is, if you don't get in the ballot, it makes no difference.
Right.
Okay. So if you're trying to qualify in the ballot in Florida and you don't make it, whatever position you have, it makes no difference if you're trying to qualify in North Carolina. Now, let me tell you what I have been able to accomplish. I was the first person in the United States to qualify by the people in the ballot in Michigan. I was the first person in the United States to qualify by the ballot by the people in Massachusetts, and the same thing in North Carolina. So it takes a team effort plus a lot of money to get a lot of petitions just to be on the ballot. Now, if all of a sudden they get to the ballot and they see that it's the Democrats have the choice, he happens to be a little bit old, 87 years old, and you happen to see Mr. Trump, that you just saw him, that he cannot even manage to go through a ramp. He's happened to be 84 years old. I think that's a little bit too old to be commander-in-chief. You need to be 100% vivid, 100% alive, and 100% with 100% of all your marbles to be able to lead the #1 country in the world.
Sure.
Now, at the same token, I'm assuming that people are getting fed up of the fights between the Democrats and the Republicans, or the Republicans and the Democrats. Mm-hmm. Every day you turn on the news, they're fighting because of this or because of that, and you need a leader to be able to unite and not to divide. And Mr. Trump's policy is quite simple. Let's divide. And let's divide, and let's continue to divide. And that's where he will conquer the world, or he'll conquer his point. He does not understand that we need to unite.
Yeah, he's definitely a two-dimensional thinker. It's very us or them. There's no context. There's no working with other people, and that definitely creates problems. One of his campaign pledges, though, was to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. A couple of our delegates have asked, if you get elected president, even though you're an independent, you're going to be faced with a very difficult challenge of an institution, an organization, a system that is really kind of stacked against outsiders. How would you approach governing as an independent, knowing that you've got lots of special interest groups and lobbyists that are going to be working to try to defeat some of the reforms and changes that you want to make?
Well, first of all, let's take a look. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
In San Diego, I was faced almost with the same problem. We have two companies that happen to have the monopoly of landfills, of recycling. And I basically saw that one of them is in Miramar, next to Miramar Naval Air Station, and that's 110% above its capacity. Mm-hmm. The other one is in Santee. And I said, San Diego needs a new recycling center. And I figured that the politicians were not ready to make the decisions. The Board of Supervisors, half of them are Republicans, half of them are Democrats. They will not make a decision. I took it to the people. I basically says, people, you are the ones that basically say so. So I basically put in Proposition A. And let me tell you something. I was surprised how smart our electorate is. Mm-hmm. It was approved by 84.5%. And it basically told the Board of Supervisors, we do not like what you're doing. We do not like that you guys don't make a decision. And if you don't make decisions, we will make it for you. So I will put basically a referendum. I will put in a petition whereby people will be able to say, look, this is what we want to do for Congress. We want a constitutional amendment for how many years you can participate as a congressman. Mm-hmm. We would like to make sure that we have money we can run for president. And how much money? It's ridiculous that you can spend $4 or $5 billion in a presidential election. We need to have a playing field for the top 4 or 5 candidates. We make sure that those 4 or 5 candidates are allowed to participate in the first debate. Mm-hmm. And maybe as it moves on, you close it to the second or third debate, where it's down to 2 candidates. But at least have the opportunity to be able to be in the debate, so the American people and the world see that we have other people that have the whereabouts to become commander-in-chief.
And along those lines, you touched on just now electoral reform and campaign reform. Some of the delegates have asked about Citizens United and where you stand on that, as well as how would you work to, obviously, since Citizens United is a Supreme Court decision, so there's limited things that you can do as an executive, but what kinds of laws would you pass to try to take some of the ill effects of Citizens United to create that balanced playing field?
Well, first of all, Citizens United is a decision from the Supreme Court,
right,
based on their interpretation of the laws that were approved by Congress or by the laws of our Constitution. Mm-hmm. So what we need to basically we need to have Congress, both the Democrats and the Republicans, is look, we need to have a playing field for everybody. We already have $1 on every tax return to go to the presidential fund. As of today, none of the 2 candidates use it because they get so much money from third-party groups that they're able to do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. But basically, we need to be able to change the rules. We won't be able to do it for 2020, but we could for 2024 or 2028. And we need to basically says, this is how much each candidate can start. This is how much the American people would put for him. There's some very interesting propositions, for example, in New York. There's some very interesting propositions in Arizona. New York has already studied it for U.S. Senate, for mayor, not for U.S. Senate, for mayor or for city council. The same thing applies to Arizona. Arizona has the same rule for governor. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just take a look, which is the best part of the Arizona rules, which is the best part of the New York rules, and use those rules so people be able to compete. And you basically tell Mr. Trump, the maximum you can spend is $1 billion, and that's your money, period. We want no outside groups. Mr. Biden, you only have $1 billion. And maybe somebody like myself with a little bit of support, maybe with $100 million, we can basically become the David against Goliath. And this is not one Goliath, this is two Goliaths. But you remember that David did win with his slingshot.
That's right. You mentioned the Supreme Court. Obviously, the Supreme Court's in the news with the recent decision that granted worker rights to gay and trans Americans. So it's put the Supreme Court in a little bit more focus because the next president most likely will have at least one, potentially two appointments to the hot bench. What kind of process would you go through in selecting a Supreme Court justice? Do you have a particular litmus test or qualifications and things that are required? And just if you could elaborate on that would be great.
Well, there's currently 9 circuits. And in those circuits, you happen to have judges that basically made it from federal bench to the Court of Appeals. And some of those judges have already decided many cases, and you know exactly where they are, where their mentality is. Do they believe in protecting property rights? Do they believe in protecting the Constitution? Or do they basically they just basically figure out, I'm going to do whatever whoever appointed me. So it starts with making sure that you start with the right crew, and you have basically the right crew, the right judges, and from those basically select. I hope, Michael, that I get the opportunity to have that potential of selecting the next 2 Supreme Court justices. Right now, I just want to make sure that the Democrats and the Republicans don't make it so impossible for us to be able to participate in at least 300, to be able to get at least 300 electoral votes. And if we're able to get the word out, I need to get included in the debate. If I get included in the debate, I will win. If I do not get included on the debate, then it will have to wait until 2024. Now, there is a potential, which I did allude, and that is, for example, if the Democrat and the Republican do not get 270 electoral votes, then the decision is made by Congress. That's the only potential that I see for an independent to be able to be the next president, number 46.
Okay. Along the lines, you talked about trying to increase your profile to get into the debates. You've talked about ballot access. What kind of marketing, advertising, and social media plan? That's one of the questions that came from one of the delegates asking about social media, earned media, paid media, digital organization. What's your plan, to the extent that you can talk about it, for increasing your name recognition so that you can achieve ballot access, but also start to make more headway within the media and work your way towards gaining popularity to be in those debates? Well,
one of the things I can tell you is that my site, my Roque101.com today, in Rocky's 2016 and 2016, if you take a look at the number of hits of the people around the world that went to my site, was amazing. I have statistics. If you go to my site, you will see the statistics of how many people will go. It was amazing how the whole world would want to know who is this person that has common sense. Who's this person that talks about united and not by unite and not divide. And if you ask me about any subjects, for example, let's talk about the subjects. America is for the Americans. We need to have a project today, for example, a new Panama Canal. The current Panama Canal is obsolete. There's a new one, and the only place you can put one is between the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Guess who's going to build it? The Chinese. Why? Because nobody's focusing on it. So every time we get a product going to the East Coast, we're going to have to pay the Chinese basically the toll fee to be able to use the new Nicaragua canal. The Chinese are doing phenomenal strides in making sure they do all the infrastructure for Africa and for South America. That's our responsibility. That's our territory. That's our franchise. We're the ones that have to invest in dams, in electrical power plants, and not allow the Chinese to basically slowly and surely doing all these huge mega infrastructure projects that belong to us.
Sure. And let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. You mentioned China. You mentioned their work in, or at least they're starting to look at building a new canal in Central America. As you know, one of the principal problems in Central America is a lot of the lack of infrastructure, high crime, and that forces people who don't necessarily want to leave their homes to leave and try to pursue other opportunities. What kind of investment strategy and plan would you have for building more of a partnership with Central American countries and building more infrastructure as well as fighting crime and drug abuse?
Well, the first thing you mentioned, infrastructure. They need water projects. They need electrical projects. They need road projects. They need bridge projects. I mean, they lack so much infrastructure that we can basically do all that infrastructure for them and charge for it. And basically get it in sort of user fees. Now it's I mentioned the Panama Canal, but take a look what the Chinese are doing. Slowly but surely, they're basically making big inroads in Africa, big inroads in South America. And where are we? We're nowhere to be found. They basically have a strategy that is a 10, 20, 50, 100-year strategy. We have a strategy 3 years to 3 years. And I mentioned 3 years because in an election year, nothing gets done in this country.
Yeah. What about Venezuela? We know that obviously this administration, the Trump administration, has had a very cool and difficult path with Venezuela. But we've seen the pictures. Many of us have heard a lot of the stories of people who have since fled Venezuela, as well as those who are still there. It's a very tragic situation. It's a human catastrophe or human disaster, really, where people are starving and lacking opportunities. Would you be in favor of loosening economic sanctions? And what would be your strategy towards trying to break the sort of problem that exists within Venezuela today?
Well, let me start it from a different perspective.
Sure.
We have had an embargo against Cuba since 1959. Okay, most of the people that were there in 1959 are not even there today. There's 11 million Cubans that are now have to face through that embargo. Now, we happen to have the United Nations. United Nations is composed of every country in the world. I do not know the exact number, but I believe there's 212 countries, plus or minus. Can you believe me that all the countries in the United Nations have voted to lift the embargo from Cuba? All the countries, except for two, the United States and Israel. How can 210 countries be right and the United States be right? If 210 countries says, please lift the embargo, and they do it year in and year out for the last 20 years, the only guy that tried to accomplish something similar was the Obama administration. And by the curse, we have the current administration that all he can do is punish those people, which he does not know. And he basically is trying to impose his will. The world is not ready for the United States to keep imposing the will. We can accomplish that by allowing free trade. We accomplish that by building infrastructure projects. We accomplish that by basically leading the world, not by changing one dictator from another dictator. Now, I do not know how well you know about this, but in 110 years ago, somebody decided to take over a country and create a brand new country. It was called the country of Panama. That used to be part of Colombia.
Correct.
They decided that, well, guess what? Colombia won't let us build a Panama Canal. Let's go ahead, create our own country. And basically, they took all that property away from Colombia. Well, guess what?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Right. How they did it, for whatever reason they did it, there's no question that the Panama Canal had to be built, but not by taking people's property. words. You need to respect. In the United States, we happen to have the eminent domain, an inverse eminent domain. And we basically make sure that if you want to take private property, you need to pay highest and best use, highest and best price. Well, they don't have to do that when they automatically take a whole country and put somebody else there for 100 years.
So just so we're clear, you would favor lifting the embargo, not just with Venezuela, but also with Cuba. In the case of Cuba, would you replace it with anything? Or go ahead.
No. Guess what? If all of a sudden we're selling our Coca-Cola there, we're selling basically our hamburgers, and we're selling our McDonald's, and we have our ins and outs, all of a sudden those people will find work and jobs and opportunities. Mm-hmm. And then they will have an opportunity to change the government system. Now, the current system in Cuba is elected almost unanimous because there's not another system but their own. So eventually there has to be another system that they will have to grow. But it doesn't grow by punishing the Cuban people. It doesn't punish by punishing the people from Venezuela. Venezuela had to have a huge petroleum assets. And by the way, whenever you see these assets and you see these fights between Venezuela and the United States, mm-hmm. the majority of the issues happen to be because of oil. Okay, it's I saw Mr. Trump say, "Look, we're getting out of Syria, but we kept the oil." I mean, are you telling me that the reason we went into Syria is so we can keep their oil?
Right. Keeping it on foreign policy, but we'll just do a couple more questions and then get back to domestic policy issues to kind of round out our conversation, because I know we have about not quite 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that you get a chance to sum up as well. China is certainly one of the major foreign policy roadblocks. We've seen the Trump administration create a lot of problems, particularly for American farmers, with a lot of his trade policies. And of course, we've seen the Chinese military aggressively expanding throughout the region. What would be your approach in terms of dealing with China in the years ahead?
China is the biggest country on earth by population. China will be the #1 power in 2050. China will dominate the world. Now, we can share that potential, but basically there's no question in my mind that if we do not have the right China approach, the United States is going to become second and maybe third. It's we need to understand, we need to basically make sure that we're there with 5G, 6G, 7G. We need to make sure that we spend the money on our people. We need to make sure that we can even solve something as simple as homeless. Mm-hmm. We have a huge homeless problem in the United States, and nobody's even focusing on it. But guess what? When you're in San Francisco, you see it. When you're in LA, you see it. When you're in San Diego, when you're in New York. I mean, how can you see, here we're talking about COVID, and we see all these homeless in 10 cities. And we are willing to spend trillions of dollars and not even spend $1 billion trying to address that issue.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that issue and bringing it back to domestic issues, one of Andrew Yang, and there have been other candidates that have talked about the idea of creating a universal basic income. And that idea has gained a little bit more popularity with such high unemployment rates. We've seen other countries across the world experiment with it. What's your thought about a universal basic income? And would you prefer more of a plan that had more targeted investments so that it doesn't become kind of the effect of kind of a welfare benefit for people?
I believe that people like to be responsible. They want to get their compensation. They want to be the American dream. All you need to give them is the opportunity. We need to create the formula so people are able to invent things. So we are able to invent new companies, invent new industries. We need to create jobs. We need to create jobs in all form. You did not even talk about education, but I would like to address education if you're ready for it.
Yes.
But if you're ready, you're ready. I have been saying on education that I would like to spend $2 to 3, maybe $5 billion and create basically a university that you can actually access via the internet. You hire the best math professors, the best physics professors, biology professors, medical professors, the best trade unions, and you basically create on YouTube channel. Today is Math 101. Today is Math 202. Today is Math 303. okay, or 1 or 3 or whatever the number happens to be. And we basically have, today we have this professor from the University of Harvard that's going to teach us basically quantum economics. Today we're going to have a person from Stanford that's going to teach us this. And we pay those professors good because they're going to create a lot, the same thing they do year in and year out in their school, where it's being benefited by 20, 30, or 40 students, now is being benefited by everybody in the United States. Everybody happens to have an iPhone. So imagine if you have an iPhone or a phone, and you're able to basically go and you have some extra time, and instead of playing a video game, you're basically studying how to basically make a chair or a mattress or something like that. Mm-hmm. I was very impressed with Norway, Sweden, Finland, whereby most of those people go and study something that can be practical. Mm-hmm. We create too many lawyers in the United States. Mm-hmm. We need to basically have less lawyers. The more lawyers we create, the more we need to change completely. We need to, one of my biggest things I have not talked about is tort reform. Mm-hmm. We need to change tort reform because we cannot continue to have these tort rules. I just saw the other day in the news that a county in Florida was trying to get billions of dollars out of Volkswagen. Mm-hmm. And Utah was trying to get billions of dollars out of Volkswagen. Well, guess what? Those companies are not going to come to the United States if every time something goes wrong and every time somebody settles with the United States, a county can basically change the rules. But we need to have a virtual university that is that's free to everybody, 100% free. And then, of course, the people that need the brick and mortars, we need to figure to make sure they go there so they're able to understand society and to have social interaction. But for the people that want to study, we need to create the best virtual university in the world. And with $5 billion, you'll have it, compared to trillions of dollars being wasted by this current government. I don't think people realize, or I don't think the government realized how many zeros are in a trillion, mm-hmm. or how many zeros are in a billion, or how many billions fit into a trillion. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, I do agree that they should do an infrastructure project sometime in the next 90 days. I hope I wish that infrastructure project would have been built 3 years ago, mm-hmm. but it's never too late. Mm-hmm. Of course, if I was president, the first thing I would do in my first 90 days to make sure that we have the biggest and the best infrastructure project in the United States to create jobs, water storage, energy distribution, clean energy, etc.
I do want to talk about energy and the environment, but just to close the loop on education, I know the vice president recently came out and talked about free public university education. Democrats have talked a lot about 2-year community college and junior college opportunities, making those free, and student loan forgiveness, basically trying to wipe out the slate of student debt, which I think is over $1 trillion, I think, in the total number of for student debt. Where do you come down on those two issues? Would you support free public education for college and university students, or do you think the virtual way is a little better? And then also, would you support student loan forgiveness for people who are high in student loan debt?
Well, I hope your number is wrong. I never heard that our student debt was $1 trillion. So it's amazing how $1 billion can change into $1 trillion so easy. So I would like to have somebody check that number. But
yeah, sorry, you might be right. I apologize.
I hope it's not $1 trillion. Yeah. We need to think outside the box. Right. And outside the box is we already are guaranteed education to everybody in the United States until high school. That's already guaranteed. So the question becomes is how do we basically get college or trade schools? And the best way to do it is by having a library. Imagine a library that starts in 2020, and every year that same library gets augmented by new professors with new theories on any and all subjects. How much is that library worth? That's what we need to invest. And I think we can do it with so little money that's not even funny. Then if we decided that we need to have certain colleges or certain universities whereby the United States is willing to sponsor either 50% or do it on a grant or do it on una beca, on a scholarship. Mm-hmm. It's we need to make sure that the best students are allowed to be able to get their college education in the university and their postgraduate. And the answer is yes, I would support for the best, just like I would support trying to get the best athletes to give us as many gold medals as possible. We need to make sure that we can reward the people that go to the Olympics. We need to make sure that we reward the people that they make America proud because we're getting gold medals, silver medals, or bronze medals. We need to create sports everywhere. We need to make sure people have the opportunity. I love sports. I don't care if it's snow skiing, water skiing, it's running. I don't care if it's tennis, squash, racquetball. I love sports. And this should be a country of sports and a country of medals.
Speaking of sports, just to digress a little bit, but one of the issues with our sports teams is the U.S. women's national team, the soccer team, and they've filed lots of lawsuits and talking about the need for equal pay for equal work, and that's become a very important issue for a lot of women in this country. Where do you stand, not just for obviously the sports team, but just sort of in the broad business world as a whole, on the issue of equal pay for equal work?
I believe it's needed. No different than we over 100 years ago. The women had the right to vote. Mm-hmm. Now it's the right for them to get equal pay, and the equal pay for the same type of work. But more importantly, if they even want to get more money, they can then go to my virtual university, get a little better, be better trained, to be male or females, so they can we can invent better things, and have better access to capital for those people that come up with those unbelievable ideas.
Yeah. Let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about energy, which is certainly a subject that's close to your heart, and then get into the environment. For energy, as you know, the U.S. has made some strides over the years in becoming a bit more energy independent, but we still have a tremendous dependence on fossil fuels. We've heard the Republican mantra is increase oil drilling, increase fossil fuel access, even increase nuclear power. What is your energy policy? Do you support taking more of a green approach? Do you support a balanced approach? Or do you support really expansive drilling and fossil fuel use?
Time will take care of everything. We're going to run out of fossil fuels.
Right.
In California, we happen to be very, very advanced in solar, electrical, and solar. We're also in wind. When you basically go from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, you see all these wind farms. So wherever it's possible to create wind or solar, or more importantly, wherever you have to have the most beautiful source of energy, which is hydro. Mm-hmm. You create water storage and you create dams, and you make it easy to create these dams to be able to store water, which we need, and in turn have that water go from one dam to another dam to another dam. We can create cleaner electricity by hydro, which everybody keeps forgetting about hydro. But guess what? We need the water, we need the storage, and we can create electricity by hydro. It's and in the process of this, we need to plant trees. There's no question that I believe we should have never have left Paris, the Paris Accord, and we need to basically have trees by the trillions. By that one, I do like the word trillion. We need trees by the trillion.
So, and do you favor, you've talked about investment in jobs and in business. You favor, I would assume, but you tell me, more investment in green technologies and expanding the portfolio of companies that are working in the green and technology space?
Well, the question is, we need to generate, like you mentioned, 20, 30, 40 million new jobs. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to be able to create 40 million new jobs in green technology. We have automobiles, but by the time the electric automobile we all be driving electric, is going to be 2060. Okay. In the meantime, there's still going to be a lot of cars that are being manufactured and running on petrol. And it's trucks might be running on hydrogen. Okay. So we need to take a look to see which is the best way we can basically go forward. You're not going to be able to change it from one day to the next. We're going to eventually get there. The private industry is going to get us there. All we need to make sure. Oh, I know what I want to talk about, to make sure that we have the right policies. One of the systems that I would like to discuss is I would like to propose a flat tax system.
Okay.
I believe that the only people that would have to file taxes are people that make $50,000 or more. I cannot believe the time and the energy that you have to spend in filing tax returns. So you need to basically creating the free society is very simple, gentlemen. If you make up to 50,000, you don't pay no taxes in the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
That automatically gives the people the momentum to go out there and work, knowing that their money is going to be theirs. And then everybody that makes 50,000 or more that are fortunate enough to make that much money, then they get to basically pay a flat fee where they can just sign a one piece of paper. This is how much I pay. This is my flat tax, and let's move on. I mean, that would make it so much. Now, let me give you an idea that I have mentioned it many times, but now I want to mention it today again.
Mm-hmm.
If you give every American that's working 4 weeks off, just like they do in France, you give mandatory 4 weeks off to every American that works. During those 4 weeks, they go to California, they go to Florida, they go to Colorado, they go and spend money. And in the meantime, what do you think you just accomplished? Well, 1/12 of the people now basically are not working. So you now have to replace all those people with working people. And we got 40 million people unemployed. So that's an interesting way of getting, if you happen to have today 200 million working, 100 million working, you would automatically increase that by basically 10%. And at the same token, what do you accomplish with those people going on holidays? Consumer spending. We need consumer spending now that we're in this crazy COVID, and we need to create jobs. And the easiest way I have figured out to do it is by giving everybody 4 weeks paid holidays.
We've talked about the economy a bit. We've talked about obviously the problem with massive unemployment. We also talked about the massive government spending that we've seen, as well as some of your proposals, which have different price tags. A couple of the delegates have asked in the chat about the federal deficit and the national debt. Obviously, it's very difficult when you've got 40 million people and all of the challenges that we're facing today to be thinking about balancing budgets and debt, because people are more concerned about the present. But that certainly is a long-term problem. How would you start to focus in on trying to balance the budget, or at least trying to spend down the national debt? Or do you think that that's even a realistic proposition given how much debt we have?
Well, I want to give a compliment to Mr. Trump. I believe in the current environment to have 0% interest rate. I believe that for the next 10 years, I would try to keep the interest rate at zero. It's the number one borrower in the world happens to be the United States. We happen to have bonds at all different types of interest rates, which will refinance all those at the current interest rates, which is basically zero. And I don't think people realize that if we would have had interest rates of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, or as high as 21%. In 1982, I had to run businesses with interest rates at 21%. So right now, part of one of the things that's helping us not be having a worse budget is basically those low interest rates. So I am very, very happy that Trump jumped on that one to put pressure in the Federal Reserve and to make sure that we all had zero interest rates. And I hope that we can have that. If we have 0% interest rates, automatically it'll give people opportunity to take their cash and try to do something productive with it to be able to generate more jobs and more productivity. And if you're able to say that you are not going to tax anybody that makes 50,000 or less, that's the right approach. It's very easy to say, let's give everybody $1,000 a week for doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
Saying everybody, if you work, you get to keep it.
Yeah. We talk about a lot of the economic challenges and the stresses that people have. Healthcare is certainly one of the top issues that comes to mind. Bernie Sanders, as you certainly are well aware, and also Senator Warren and others have advocated a Medicare for all approach. The president and the Republicans have largely stayed away from big, grandiose healthcare policy ideas. They talked about repealing and replacing Obamacare, but haven't really come forward with a great detailed plan. What would be your approach for healthcare, particularly given the fact that we see with COVID testing, people go in and they come out and they've got bills that are hundreds of thousands of dollars and medical expenses that are crazy, and others that are losing their health insurance because they're out of work. So what would be your solution for trying to address the healthcare crisis in America?
Canada has free care for health care for all. Cuba has free health care for all. The biggest problems we have in the United States is the cost of the medicines.
Right.
The other day, I bought some medicine. It cost me basically $1 in Mexico. In the United States, it cost me $864. There's something out of whack. You can basically go to Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and you'll be amazed what you can buy. And the government basically tells you what you can sell maximum, those type of products. Here, they got out of control. And one of the reasons they say this out of control is because of lawsuits. Mm-hmm. We need to basically do a combination of to make sure a maximum you can pay for medicine, and two, make sure you create tort reform. Mm-hmm. You're able to create tort reform and limit how much the lawyers or the people can get for different mistakes, which mistakes are bound to happen. But you cannot have a company that's starting makes one mistake and they lose their whole company because of one mistake. It's mathematically illogical. You're rewarding basically the lawyers. Right. We have tort reform, and we need to. You're talking about jobs. All the medicines that have no longer have their patents have expired. We need to generate all those medicines and create new factories to be able to. In the United States, should maybe even give the money for those new factories, as long as they can bring in those prices at reasonable prices as they do worldwide. But the whole thing's out of whack. I had a friend of mine that went to the hospital. He was there for 5 weeks, and the bill was $1.1 million. And he had absolutely nothing. I mean, the whole system is upside down. And what we need to do is make sure that we know what we're attacking. Originally, Obamacare had the right strategy. They had the right focus. But by the time it went through Congress and all the special interests, they basically made an egg into a fried egg. Okay, you need to basically allow the egg to flourish and become a chicken, not basically break it and make it into fried in the middle of the asphalt. Mm-hmm. But the ideas of Obamacare were correct. Now we need to make sure we correct them, and that has to be included with tort reform and putting caps at maximum that people can charge for medicines and for services. Great.
We're a little over the top of the hour, and I appreciate you sticking with us. I know we talked about just an hour, but I do want to give you a chance to at least offer a couple of takeaways for voters who have gotten a chance now to get to know you a little bit as you kind of sum up your campaign and the strengths and the things that you really want voters to take away from who you are and what you can accomplish in this election. What would those 3-5 key things that you want to make sure that they're aware of be?
We need to have a third party. We need to have a viable third party. So all of a sudden, it's the Democrats might have 40% of the House, the Republicans might have 30, 35, and a third party has 20% of the House. And imagine how beautiful it would be if those guys would have to get together and negotiate between each other. And then basically, if the Republicans happen to convince the independents, now you have a new law. Oh, we'll talk about that in a minute. And if the Democrats convince the independents, or vice versa, imagine if the Democrats get together with the Republicans. Imagine how beautiful that would be. But one of the things that I would like to ask the American people is we have so many laws in the books that are so old, so obsolete. And maybe by the time we pass any new laws, one of the conditions of passing a new law, they have to bring 10 old ones that we get to retire. I didn't say which 10, but let's figure out which are the obsolete ones. Mm-hmm. And let's focus on how we simplify our legal system so we basically have less lawyers.
Excellent. And then as far as ballot access, your plan going forward again is to continue to...
Ballot access, I already have qualified in Delaware. I already have qualified in South Carolina. I'm pretty close to qualifying in Maine. I basically have commitments for Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. It's very easy to qualify in Colorado, in Utah, in Idaho. I'm there. I have commitments, hopefully, that I will be able to get California, which is a biggie. And my goal is assuming that we do not, the two parties are not close enough. My goal is to get at least a couple of electoral votes. My best place to get them is basically Maine, Nebraska. That's a good place to get them based on the current rules. And if we happen to be at a stalemate, then we might be able to make a miracle and have Congress basically make a decision to pick between the Republican, the Democrat, or yours truly.
Sure. And don't forget, don't leave out Virginia, which is my state, where we don't have as many electoral votes as Florida, but we only require 5,000 signatures across the state. So that's definitely very doable as well, sir. So
well, you got 13 electoral votes.
Yes.
Virginia is on my map that I told you is 270 to win. It's right there.
Yeah.
And you have 13, and it looks like it's blue. It's how do you call it? It's not even light blue. It's medium blue. So it's that's going to be a tough state to turn. But the answer is yes. We do need to be in Virginia. I have family in Virginia. I have properties in Virginia. I have properties in well, I'm getting old.
That's all right. Your properties everywhere. You're across the country. I know that. One person asked, because he's excited about your campaign, are you hiring staff? I think you got some people who want to join up. People who are interested in your campaign, they should go to Rocky 101. Join Rocky on Twitter, right? Where else can they find you?
Well, they can basically do that right now. Where we're really putting all our energy over the next 60 days is most of the states as far as getting ballot access. So if the person that wants a job, if he happens to be in one of those states that it is not out of this world to get in the ballot, my goal is to qualify in as many ballots as I can. It would be ideal if I could say the 50 states, but there's some states that's mathematically impossible.
Yeah, I understand. Well, hey, Rocky, this has been a wonderful experience for me. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last few weeks and getting a chance to talk with you tonight. And I really appreciate you making the time. I know you're very busy out campaigning, working. Really appreciate you making the time to join us tonight. And please be well on the campaign trail, and we look forward to seeing you this Saturday at the convention.
A huge complex with huge apartment complexes in Norfolk, Virginia.
Yes. Okay.
So we have that, and then we have another one, and how to call it on the other extreme. But at least I remember one of them.
That's all right. That's a good deal. Well, we'll see you at the convention on Saturday. Good luck, and that concludes today's webcast and interview with Mr. De La Fuente. Please remember that we are going to make this available on demand. So if you don't get a chance to watch all of it, you've had a chance to tune in and out. We are going to have it on our website. It's going to be on Facebook. As we've been streaming it live, it'll be on YouTube. We'll make sure that Mr. De La Fuente's campaign gets the video as well to share. So we really, again, Rocky, appreciate the time. But that concludes today's event. Thank you all. Be well. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I actually, for the first time, I just happened to saw the questions that were being asked on the side. It's but you didn't ask me some of those questions. But anyway, I answered everyone that you asked me.
Yes, I mean, some of the questions were, I think, in line with what we were talking about. I mean, we're happy to, if you want to add, was there one in particular that you saw that you wanted to answer?
Well, I saw Beverly. It's I will talk to Beverly about the flat tax. It's sure. Basically when you basically started with anybody that works for the first 50,000, they don't have to file a tax return. They don't have to even pay a tax. So automatically, you're basically eliminating most of the American society when you put a limit that nobody under $50,000 pays any tax. And then everybody else from that moment pays a tax. And then it's a matter of which flat tax did you put it. You make it simple. There's too many loopholes today for when you file tax returns. So we need to basically figure out how we're going to do it and how we're going to stagger it. What flat tax will be paid by whom without any loopholes.
Well, you've looks like you've won Beverly over. She says, I like the $50,000 floor. So there you go. You've won someone over. So that's good.
Well, actually, I just saw it. She liked the $50,000 floor. So
yeah.
But Beverly, the time that we spend in doing those tax returns is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The way Congress comes up with all these loopholes. There's a loophole for in Kentucky. I don't know if you're aware, but if you rent a house in Kentucky for 2 months for $100,000 a month, you pay no tax. I don't know if you were aware of that.
That seems like a good investment strategy now that I am aware of it. Thank you. Speaking of the IRS, I know we're over time, but I do want to ask this. One of the things that's been interesting is when the IRS had to go out and do stimulus checks, particularly to seniors who don't pay taxes currently. They receive Social Security benefits. They spent 3 weeks basically building out a simple file system for seniors to go online and fill out a non-pay tax return so that they could get their stimulus checks. And then after the 3 weeks and 4 weeks of building this system, they realized that, well, they could just tap into the Social Security Administration, which has direct deposit already set up, and just deliver the checks that way. There's a really big disconnect with technology and government today, where there's a lot of antiquated systems. What kinds of steps would you take to try to modernize government to get the services delivered at a higher rate and higher value for Americans?
You need to create an incentive for people working in government to come up with the best ideas, to be able to come with the best practices to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if we talk about my tax system, my requirement would be everybody would have to file a one-page paper that says, I made no more than $50,000 this year. Name, address, Social Security number. And automatically that person, you will now have him in the system. So all you have to do is have the person say under penalty of perjury, I did not make more than $50,000. And then vice versa. If the guy that happens to make $100,000 or $1 million, he says, I made $1 million and here is my flat percentage that I'm paying out of that number under penalty of perjury. One little one-page form. You don't know how happy I would be that I would not. I mean, I don't even go through all my tax returns. They're so huge that it's ridiculous. And then if you get audited, here you go again. All the time wasted and energy on that effort. So but I do believe we need to simplify our lives. I love the idea of giving everybody a 4 weeks paid vacation. That automatically would increase our workforce by 12%. Excuse me, by the reverse, by 8%. But hey, if we give them 6 weeks, then it becomes higher percentage. But let's give them 4 weeks. 4 weeks is enough.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. I want everybody to stay safe, stay at home, and enjoy your families.
Thank you. You too, sir. Enjoy your dinner. I know we kept you a little past time, but we really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.